I know, dear friends, for many of us this summer, our hearts have been very heavy, witnessing what's been happening in the land of Israel, worrying about our brothers and sisters who are struggling to maintain their life in a very difficult situation. Several times this summer, I've been able to speak to you and offer you my own thoughts and insights on the conflict. But what I really haven't been able to do is to give you a sense of what it's been like for those who have lived daily under the threat of rockets and mortars and death and destruction. I had an opportunity this week, just the other day. I got a phone call from a very dear friend of mine, Rabbi David Wilfond. Some of you know Carolyn Wilfond, who's a member of our congregation, unfortunately hasn't been able to be with us for a while due to illness. Her son David is Dean of Students. Dean of Students? No? Director of Education at the Hebrew Union College in Jerusalem, where both Cantor Ovadia had a chance and I had a chance to study. In addition to that, he's really one of the leaders of progressive Judaism in the land of Israel. And he said, Tony, I'm going to be in town. I'm visiting my mom, and I wanted you to know I was here. And I said, David, would you do me a great favor? I said, would you come to my congregation and speak a little bit about what this past summer has been like for those who are living daily with what we've seen on the news and only heard about in emails and in the cries of anguish that we've shared with our friends and neighbors. And David said, Tony, he said, I would be happy to do that. And it's a privilege for me to welcome my dear friend and colleague, Rabbi David Wilfond. He's filling in for me. There's a substitution on the thing tonight, but I hope you will understand and appreciate the fact that we have a chance to hear from this really wonderful leader of our movement and our people.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you to your rabbi and your cantor for inviting me to speak with you this evening, and also a hearty mazel tov to our B'nai Mitzvah, to Matthew and Micah on your bar mitzvah ceremonies tomorrow. Before I share with you my experiences of this summer, just a few words about my background and my perspective. People often want to know, who is this guy? Who's this rabbi? Where are you coming from? My family lived on Marco Island near Naples for 18 years before moving to Palm Beach County. And my mother lives in a nursing home nearby and is a member of the congregation. I attended the University of Florida. I'm actually a Gator before I went to rabbinical school in Cincinnati. And I've served as a congregational rabbi in Kiev, Ukraine, in Boston, Massachusetts, in London, England. And 10 years ago, I made Aliyah. I moved to Jerusalem, where I worked at the Hebrew Union College for 7 years. And for the last 3 years, although I'm still at Hebrew Union College, I've served as the Director of Education for the Union of Reform Judaism, the URJ, and their programs in Israel. And that means I'm responsible for the Nifty in Israel summer programs, which is about 550 teenagers that come to Israel in 15 groups for about 5 weeks. And for the URJ Kesher birthright programs, these are Reform Movement birthright programs, it's about 50 groups a year, about 2,000 participants. I'm also married, and my wife and I have a 3-year-old son, a 1-year-old daughter, and God willing, we're expecting another child in February. So now that I've provided you with a little biographical sketch, I want to move on to our topic. Let's talk about Israel. This past summer has been very difficult. I would add, for me personally, I felt as though this has been the most difficult time in Israel since I made Aliyah 10 years ago in 2004. If I were to pick an event to call the starting point for the chain of events of this summer, it would be the kidnapping in June of 3, some of you may remember this, 3 Israeli teenagers who went missing at night. It was about 9 or 10 o'clock on a Thursday night, and it was all over the news that the teens had disappeared. It was assumed they had been kidnapped, although no one claimed responsibility. A massive search was undertaken by the army and hundreds of volunteers. And people searched everywhere, in caves, in crevices, in basements. Until the end of the 3 weeks of a grueling search, the boys were found, sadly, dead, and their bodies had been buried in a shallow grave in the Palestinian-controlled territory in the hills near Hebron. The 3 weeks of searching was a time of tension, as the nation collectively held its breath, hoping the boys would be found okay. The boys were teenagers, 15 and 16, and everyone identified with them as being their own. In keeping with Jewish custom in Israel, the funeral was held within 24 hours after the discovery of the bodies. At the time of the funeral, I was on my way to the airport driving my father-in-law to Ben Gurion when suddenly we found ourselves in a huge traffic jam near the Israeli city of Modi'in. Thousands of people were on their way to the funeral to stand in support and solidarity with the families of the teens. The funeral had become a national affair. The Israeli president and prime minister gave speeches of condolence and said that those responsible for this heinous crime would be found and held accountable. The next day, on the news, it was announced that an Arab teenager had gone missing in East Jerusalem. Rumors were flying on the news and on the internet about what happened and who was responsible. One rumor was that the teen had been gay and had been killed by his own family in some kind of an honor killing. Shortly thereafter, the Arab teen's body was found, and all were shocked to hear that he had been murdered by 3 Jewish youths. There was an outpouring of condemnation from the President Shimon Peres and the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and the young vigilantes were arrested. Almost immediately, East Jerusalem and the West Bank erupted in massive riots. The rioting and chaos continued for several days, and then, perhaps as a show of solidarity, the rockets and missiles from Gaza began falling on Israeli cities and towns near the Gaza Strip. The IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, responded with airstrikes on the missile sites. Hamas announced it would open the gates to hell. That Saturday night after Shabbat, we finally got our children to sleep. And my wife and I were drinking hot tea when suddenly we heard it. We heard the loud and scary noise of the air raid siren. We looked at each other and said, "Oh no." We're thinking to ourselves, about a minute before the missiles will land. With a lot of adrenaline pumping and fear, we ran upstairs, scooped up our sleeping children out of their beds, and ran downstairs and out of the apartment and across a parking lot to a bomb shelter, where we huddled and heard 3 loud thuds. Boom, 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 of the impact of the missiles hitting the ground. I looked at my wife, holding our 1-year-old daughter, and I'm holding our 3-year-old son, and I say, "I'm sorry." My wife was born in London. We met 5 years ago in Jerusalem while she was on a trip, and I convinced her to come and make a life with me in Jerusalem. I never imagined we would be huddling with our babies in a bomb shelter, hearing the impact of falling missiles and feeling the ground shake as our neighborhood in Jerusalem was bombed from Gaza. A few days later, in the afternoon, I'm at work at Hebrew Union College in Jerusalem when the air raid sirens go off again. We run down to a shelter and hear 5 heavy thuds. Boom, 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 boom. Later, we are told this is the noise of the Iron Dome missile defense system intercepting and exploding the Hamas missiles just over our heads. We wait the 10 minutes that the army says you need to wait after a siren before you can go out of the shelter. And then I jump into my car and drive home. My wife and children are hiding in our small bathroom that is under a flight of steps. My 3-year-old tells me there was a house alarm, as he calls it. I don't really know how to explain it to him. I don't want to make him more scared. I basically tell him everything's okay. We change the topic, we make dinner, do bath time, and put the children to bed. That night, a missile makes a direct hit on a home in a town called Ramat Raziel, about 10 minutes drive from Jerusalem's Hadassah Hospital, a suburb basically of Jerusalem. At Kibbutz Suba, just a mile and a half from there, we have 120 American teenagers, Niftyites, huddling in a kibbutz bomb shelter. The next morning, we move all of our groups to what I call the safety triangle, a region between the 3 Israeli cities of Tiberias, Afula, and Beit Sha'an. This is in the north, an area that is quiet and beautiful and out of range. And here our nifty teens will ride out the summer to the end of our programs. Out of 550 kids, only 3 went home early. This was not easy for the parents. We sent them daily emails updating them of their group, their itinerary, the situation. Everybody had cell phones. Parents were frequently talking to their children. On the phone, moms and dads asked me, "Can you guarantee my child's safety?" And I honestly had to say, I cannot guarantee, but we will do everything and are doing everything possible to provide your children with as safe an experience as we can. A surreal moment occurred while I was speaking to a mother in the U.S. from my home phone when suddenly the air raid siren goes off. I tell the mother, "Forgive me," and I hang up. I say, "I'll call you back." I hang up, and I have to run upstairs and grab my son from his bed. My wife grabs our daughter, and again we run for the shelter and huddle with our neighbors. One neighbor brings her dog, to my son's delight. There are some lighter moments, even in the craziness. Israel endured 10 consecutive days of constant missile attacks on Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, Beersheba, and the cities of the south. At one point, rogue elements in Lebanon fired missiles on Israel's Galilee, the northern region, and Syria, and from Syria, rockets on the same day were landing on the Golan Heights. In this situation, Israel called up 80,000 reserve soldiers who gathered on Israel's border with Gaza. From our nifty summer groups, suddenly our Israeli counselors, men and women, were being called up to the army. After 10 days, Israel began a ground invasion of the Gaza Strip, and we all feared the worst for us Israelis and for the people of Gaza. Israel is a very small country. There's barely 1 degree of separation between us. Sunday night, I'm watching the news, and I hear that a 20-year-old from Jerusalem has been killed in the Gaza Strip. He is a bulldozer driver, he's a soldier, and his name is Moshiko, a nickname for Moshe. I have a bad feeling. My son loves bulldozers. His nursery school teacher has a son who also loves bulldozers, and he is 20 years old and is doing his army service as a bulldozer driver. It's already after 10 at night, and I can't help it. I send a text message to our babysitter, who is close to our nursery school teacher's family, and she texts me back the bad news that yes, the young man who was killed on the news was our son's teacher's son, and the funeral will be tomorrow. I I've been to the Har Herzl Military Cemetery more times than I can count because I teach tour guides how to guide at Mount Herzl, which is like the Arlington National Cemetery for Israel. When I arrive for the funeral, the cemetery is packed with thousands of mourners. I see a large tent under which there are tons of people, and then I begin to understand what's going on. There are 8 funerals happening, one after another. On this day, 8 young men from Jerusalem are being buried. It feels like a factory. One funeral ends, and I hear a voice on a loudspeaker asking the family to leave in order to make room for the next family and the next funeral. The mayor of Jerusalem is there and speaks to each family. Thousands are present. Many young soldiers are from Moshiko's unit, boys and girls, 18, 19, 20, and their parents and their siblings, and there is much crying and wailing. Later I will hear that our Reformed synagogue in Jerusalem, Kol HaNeshama, has lost 2 boys in Gaza. Moshiko had been driving a bulldozer that was destroying one of the 50 or so tunnels that Hamas has dug under the border in order to enter Israel and attack us. Hamas, we are told, was planning a massive terrorist attack for Rosh Hashanah and had constructed tunnels that reached under the dining halls and children's houses of several of the kibbutzim near the border. Some tunnels were as much as 4 miles long and were built at an expense of more than $1 million. In an area where people are relatively poor, instead of building hospitals, schools, kindergartens, universities, Hamas took money that was intended for humanitarian aid, for helping people live a better life, and instead that money was spent on missiles, tunnels, and weapons. It would seem that for Hamas, killing Israelis is more important than helping the people of Gaza live a better life. On Tisha B'Av, it was announced there'll be a ceasefire. Weary, I hold my breath and pray, Oseh Shalom bin Romav, let there be peace and quiet, enough of fear and of death. And then 20 minutes after the ceasefire begins, Hamas is again firing missiles on our cities. And this time one lands about a mile from the airport. The FAA, the American Federal Aviation Administration, tells U.S. air carriers that they are prohibited to fly to Israel. And then most of the European carriers do the same, and suddenly the airport is closed, and we in Israel feel cut off and alone. And then finally it dawns on me, Hamas has sent these missiles after the ceasefire. For them there is no ceasefire. They want to keep fighting, to hurt and kill as many Israelis as possible. They are not interested in an end of fighting and peace. They want to kill us, period. A friend of mine quips, ceasefire to them means we cease and they fire. In the world media, Israel has been accused of disproportionate force. They say, look at the numbers. See how many Gazans have died and see how many Israelis have died. This shows the Israelis are monsters, they say. Should I wish that there are more Israeli deaths, more Israeli victims, then the world would love us more? Because Israel invested its resources on bomb shelters and on the Iron Dome, Israelis were more protected. And the Gazans, who were cynically used as human shields as Hamas launched its missiles from schoolyards, hospitals, and mosques. One of the tragic victims of this war is the simple people of Gaza. Hamas wins if it kills Israelis, but Hamas also wins if Gazans are killed, as it serves their propaganda goal of making Israel look bad. One of the unsung heroes of this war is the Iron Dome missile defense system. In Hebrew, it's called the Kippat Barzel, the Iron Kippah, or it sounds a little funny to say, the Iron Yarmulke. As a kid, I once asked a rabbi, "Why do we wear a kippah?" And he responded, "It protects you." For Israelis, there is a giant yarmulke in the sky that protects us and keeps the missiles from landing on our heads. The situation in Israel continues. I don't know how it will end, but I know what we must do in the meantime. It's important not to lose hope. That's what the terrorists want. It's important that we don't stop living. That's what the terrorists want. We need to celebrate life. We need to celebrate bar mitzvahs and bat mitzvahs that will happen here tomorrow morning. We need to celebrate weddings under the chuppah and make plans to enjoy the upcoming Jewish New Year of Rosh Hashanah. Israeli Jews need American Jews. We Israelis feel besieged, alone at war, in a world that condemns us because we protect ourselves when we are attacked. I ask you, please partner with our Jewish brothers and sisters in Israel and support those groups that share your values in Israel. We are one family, one big mishpucha. This is a time to stand together. This is a time to let your family know, your mishpucha know that you care. Shabbat shalom.
Prayer for the state of Israel. Avinu Shebashamayim. O Heavenly Father, Protector and Redeemer of Israel, bless the state of Israel, which marks the dawning of hope for all who seek peace. Shield it beneath the wings of your love. Spread over it the canopy of your peace. Send your light and your truth to all who lead and advise, guiding them with your good counsel. Establish peace in the land and fullness of joy for all who dwell there, and let us say, Shema.